Well, thanks for tuning in today. I have a really exciting guest. His name is Nathan Stuck, and he is an expert on B Corps. B Corporation is a process of businesses who want to do well and to do good in the world, which is what we talk about a lot on the podcast. So I'm super excited. We get into how to create B Corps, what it means to be a B Corp, and we even spend some time at the end imagining what it would look like if our businesses oriented themselves toward being forces for good in the world. So if you're ready, let's get started. Well, hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I don't know, wherever you're listening to this. Welcome to A Mission Driven You. I am super excited today to have Nathan Stuck with us. And Nathan is an award-winning leader in the B Corp community. He's the founder and CEO of Profitable Purpose Consulting. And we're going to talk about business for social good, which if you're a listener to this podcast, you know is a central theme we keep coming back to. So Nathan, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, well, excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And this is right up my alley. So I'm excited for the conversation and see where it takes us.
That's great. So I mentioned before in our little green room conversation, there's always one question I ask first. Because we started focusing on interdependence, it's still a big topic. So I want you to reflect real quickly on somebody that made a difference for you, or some group that made a difference for you. When you look back, you're like, dang, like they were really important in my journey.
Yeah, I mean, there's two like super easy ones. Well, there's a third one, but I just shouted her out on another podcast, so we'll keep the rotation going. Sorry, Christina. So for me, it's pretty simple. I mean, Jeff Jones, my old boss at Victorium. So I mean, I limped into an MBA program, like burned out on capitalism, burned out on like everything, just kind of like I got laid off twice in 6 months. I worked two more like terrible jobs, and so I go back and so that failure happens and you start kind of like questioning everything,
right?
And so like my second semester, here's this project that's like a B Corp project, and so I took like whatever, I don't know what that is, but I'll sign up for it, and it was through the Net Impact Club. I'm like, this is whatever. And because I'd said I'd throw myself into anything experiential, this is my last reset. And I was a full-time MBA student in my 30s, not 24, 2 years out, like let's go get a pay raise. It was like, oh God, I'm trying to reset my life. Right. So I walk in this meeting and Jeff is there with his wife Alice, and like I just immediately liked them, and I fell in love with the concept of B Corps, and I kept working on the project. The semester ends and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? He's like, it's probably gonna die on the vine because we're starting to grow. I was like, well, when I get back in the fall, let's keep I'll get the band back together. We'll keep this project going. Yeah. So we did. And I ended up like by December, he's like, what are you doing when you graduate? Please come work for me. So I ended up going to work for them. But honestly, it's just those meetings we had when I was a student. And afterwards, I mean, I'm partly trying to network, and I partly also just really liked this couple, and they would always our meetings were always from 3 to 4 on Friday in Athens. So what happens at 4 o'clock on Friday in Athens?
I'm familiar with that.
It's called it rhymes with Yappy Mauer. So he would say, who wants to go have a drink? And so I would go with him every week, and we get into these conversations about business, and and like you get to that point of like failing and trying and failing and trying, and like keep picking, and like you start to lose confidence. But I still always thought I had a really sharp business mind, like and I would have these conversations with him where he wanted my opinion on some issue they were having at work, and I'd give him, and he'd be like, hey, we tried that out and it was a great idea, and da-da-da. And you're like, maybe like he restored all of my confidence when I was kind of a broken MBA student, and then going to work for him and just empowering. And then come full circle, he helped me start Be Local Georgia, and kind of empowered me to do whatever the hell I want to do as long as I got my work done. And then towards the very end, 2021, when I had somebody come and say, hey, I want to pay you to do this, I went to Jeff and he said, hey, why don't you start your own LLC, and just kind of like, as long as you're doing your work during work hours, I don't really care what you do the rest of the day, and see if you can't grow something. And last July we had the conversation, because that was kind of like the, hey, if we cross that bridge when we cross it. And I was like, I think it's time to cross the bridge. And So I went full time on my own. So him, and then Jared Myers, another one that like early on in my B Corp days of running to Jared, who runs kind of the sister to Be Local Georgia, Florida for Good. Like Jared and I, same thing, where like here's this like super successful businessman that wanted to like pick my brain about business questions. And so like, I think it started with Jeff, and then Jared kind of mentored me out in the B Corp space as well. So just two great bosses and two people that live that like B Corp ethos that, which is why, I literally before this got off a call with a friend who's been laid off now twice in 8 months, a corporate recruiter. And I'm like, dude, whatever help you need, I've been there. So kind of that like paying it forward now for him, hopefully. So
I love that story. Thanks for sharing it. I love asking that question because people often they sort of dig back into the old files and like, oh yeah, like I haven't thought of that person, but man, they were the difference maker for you. It's somebody you've been in touch with more recently, but I love that story. So you've mentioned, we've already talked about B Corp. I think we've already said it 7 times or 8 times. Who's counting, but so what's a B Corp? Let's start there. Let's just start with the basics. Tell us what a B Corp is.
First of all, if you say B Corp 3 times fast, I show up in your living room. So be careful.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So B Corps are to for-profit businesses what LEED is to a building, to a sustainable building. It is an outside accredited certification that you can get the nonprofit B Lab administers. And it's funny, I've had so many conversations recently. Obviously, the nature of my work, I help companies do this. But even now, you have to recertify your business every 3 years. And I'm getting calls from people who are recertifying, who are like, it's gotten harder. Like, what is your rate and when can you start? And so and I've heard it equated not only the LEED like analogy, but also to stuff that LEED was doing in the 70s. When LEED first started, like LEED's beginning requirements became building codes. And so like LEED kind of kept evolving, and B Corp is too. Like, so things that were foreign 15 years ago, like volunteer time off and parental leave instead of maternity leave, like all these things now are kind of like standard business practices. And so like B Lab's moving those standards, but the overall assessment that you have to take to certify is there's 5 categories. So there's corporate governance. So, how transparent are you? What kind of information are you sharing with your employees? That kind of thing. And then from corporate governance, it goes into the worker section. So like, what's the pay multiplier from top employee to bottom employee? What's the what type of benefits do you offer? What type of retirement do you offer? What percentage? Okay, you have healthcare. That's great. What percentage of your employees are actually signed up for it? Some of these, like when they really dig deep in that worker section, community has all of obviously the community impact, social impacts, volunteerism, pro bono, charitable donations, diversity, equity, inclusion, supply chain diversity. And then you get in from there, you go into the environmental section, which is obviously the environmental section, where you're like, what's in it? Environmental stuff. But, it's looking at like how local is your supply chain? How, what sort of impact are you having with that? What is your, what are your scopes 1 and 2 emissions? That's great that your website and it's, well, let me come back to that point because it's worth saying. And then the last section is customers. Do you treat your people like, or your customers like people and not data? And if if you do stuff with their data, do you tell them what you're doing with it? Just be upfront and say, hey, here's what we collect. Here's how we use it. So, and again, this is an a la carte menu. You don't have to do everything. You have to get 80 points out of 200. So, for early stage businesses, like, I'm hopefully about to make my first hire. Healthcare is not viable yet. I'm going to include a stipend for healthcare, but that's just it. But down the road, I want it, but it doesn't preclude me from being a B Corp. So, and the thing, of course, now I lost my brilliant argument that I was going to make. So the overarching thing about the assessment that I love that will drive you nuts as you go through it, and I heard somebody say this recently, I wish I could credit them, so just put on the record, I'm stealing a quote, but most places go, you put on your website, hey, we're doing great in the environment and we're doing all these things in the community, and most people go, great, that's awesome. B Lab goes, great, that's awesome, prove it.
Yeah.
So like there is no, when you look at company websites and you see like, we give back to our local community and we care about sustainably sourcing our materials, means absolutely nothing. If there's no data, my red flag, which is kind of where the B Corp, the value of that B Corp logo
Yeah.
comes in. That designation is like every company nowadays is saying the exact same things. But if you see that little B Corp logo, you kind of have an idea that, all right, I don't know everything that goes in, kind of like a lead building. I don't know what makes lead
Right.
platinum, lead gold.
Right.
I just know lead platinum super impressive, and B Corp's kind of the same way. I don't know. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to know how the sausage is made. Just know that it is a very difficult certification to receive for
Yeah.
your business.
Yeah. That's incredibly helpful. Can you give us some examples of B Corps we might know?
Let's see. Come on, product placement. Where are they? Well, I got my Tom Bean backpack, but that's not a more well-known one. That was an employee appreciation gift I did at my old job where I was like, Patagonia's going to survive the pandemic, but I'm worried about some of the smaller ones. So,
Right.
but yeah, Patagonia, Warby Parker, Tom Shoes, Allbirds,
Yeah. Yeah.
Bombas. Let's see, Tillamook cheese, Cabot cheese, Ben and Jerry's, Jenny's ice cream, Nadamu, which makes coconut ice cream.
Oh, yeah.
Danone North America is the largest B Corp in the world. Nespresso just certified.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I
so
did
you're
not know
getting
that.
some of the big ones, which causes a ruffle in the community because you're like, well, how did they get to, like,
Right.
which is also kind of I think we've made it moment when you're starting to get companies of that size, of Danone size, of Nespresso size,
Yeah.
seeing the need to go. And again, I do this for a living. I've helped companies, I'd say the biggest companies I've helped are in like the 200, 250 employee range. And those are a beast to
Yes.
turn that cruise liner,
Right.
versus like helping the company with 4 employees that are all part-time or something like, yeah, we're just turning the speedboat. We're going to add some policies. We're going to write the handbook. We're done.
Right.
The big ones, like, I mean, it's still not, by the way, that's probably an overstatement. We're still not just done. Those are still difficult, but like those bigger ones are incredibly difficult. So like the thought of being on, and I remember meeting somebody who worked on Danone's certification. I wouldn't even know if I want that as a client. That sounds just,
Right.
I mean, and it was an employee's full-time job, and she had a team to get them B Corp certified. To put that into perspective of like,
Right.
I mean, that's one of the reasons I try to give some grace to some of those bigger companies that people kind of like, well, it's a corporation. I don't think any company is perfect, but like they made a serious investment in getting
Yeah.
that certification to hire a full-time person, let her build up a team, and go subsidiary by subsidiary around the world, because you have to individually certify each
Yeah.
subsidiary.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's an impressive undertaking.
Yeah. I love that Nespresso certified, because to me, that's an example that you don't have to be perfect. You can get an 80 out of 200 and still certify as a B Corp. I worked in the environmental space for a few years, and, the thought of some company that has disposable product being a B Corp, doesn't always necessarily gel, but it's more of a direction, isn't it? It's more of a what direction are we as a company heading than are we perfect, and do we achieve perfect scores in all 5 areas? Is that fair?
Yeah, it's funny. I had a conversation last week with Trip Pomeroy, who's one of the guys who started Cafe Campesino, which is where I still buy my coffee. Awesome B Corp down in America. So they were one of the first like coffee cooperatives. So they would get a bunch of small roasters to go down to Central and South America and get these farms that had formed cooperatives and buy coffee in bulk, and pay real prices, not commodity prices, and basically have uplifted entire communities that we've always extracted and exploited out of poverty. And so Trip and I were talking about this, and I was very curious to get his opinion. And he stopped me at one point and said, Nathan, I think the answer's in the gray. It's not an espresso can never certify, and it's not that like, that we should all be thrilled that they're certified. It's somewhere in the middle that I think you hit the nail on the head. They're on their journey. And if their journey is where the standards are now, and this is why those standards are going to keep evolving, and at what point do we, and it's been a heated debate in the B Corp community of like, I mean, some people are like, absolutely no way, they should have never been allowed to certify, because there's things in their supply chain years past of all of a sudden somebody does an audit and there's child labor in Southeast Asia or wherever they were getting beans from. And so there's things that like pop up, but at what point, like, is that an irredeemable sin? And if this certification is making them take that long, hard look in the mirror and figure out where can we do better? And they are a huge company with tons of employees. So you think about the impact of like making a better workplace for on that scale, like I would say I'm of the argument that like we should be encouraging these companies because the impact is greater, not negating the impact of somebody like my company or Trip's company, which reminds me I need to reorder coffee. But I think it's important though. I think that the ability, it's also a proof of concept really of that we've made it when it's making the Financial Times article. Like one more person taps me into like comment in a LinkedIn thread. Nathan, interested in your opinions. Look at the last 6 posts I've been tagged in. I've already done it. So, but it's where that I think that we can officially say the demand curve has shifted. The demand curve has shifted and businesses are starting to go, I better get over there. I mean, it's chasing the money and also embracing that argument too. Like, oh, they're just doing it for the ROI. Cool. If that's what it takes to make companies great places to work, better stewards of the economy, of their supply chain, to pay living wage, to do all these great things, if it takes them going like, oh, this is what it's going to take for people to buy our product, that means we're doing our job as consumers. Like we're changing the world. I mean, I hate to say that, it sounds over the top, but that's what it means. Is we need to continue to shop with our values and work with our values, and we will continue to see these big companies follow us. So sorry, I got really worked up there.
No, that's amazing, man. All rants are welcome. Trust me. So here's where I want to go next. So you mentioned that you entered into your MBA program, burned out on capitalism. I think if not careful, there's a view out there that B Corps are, modern day hippies who are just, trying to start granola factories or whatever, fill in the blank.
Awesome granola companies, don't get me wrong.
Well, that's true too. Yeah, sure. But so I want you to kind of dispel that myth. Like what's the relationship of B Corps to capitalism, and I'll start with that question. I have a bigger question about capitalism, but let's start with that question.
I love this question. This literally, we talked about our TED Talks before this. I can't wait. I wish mine was out right now where I'm like, I just watched it because I had to make the edits to get it to 18 minutes. So I just saw it and was like, oh, that's good. It's going to be, so anyway, but I talk about that and I make all these arguments about where capitalism has led us. And I like to dance on Milton Friedman's grave a little bit once in a while. And I'm wearing a red sport coat in the video. And I'm like, so surely everybody can tell by now I'm like a burn it all down socialist. I hate capitalism. It's the worst thing ever. And I was like, wrong. I'm an unapologetic capitalist. I think capitalism is the best economic system we've invented. I think when you boil down what the definition of capitalism is, it is simply a private market that you and I and entrepreneurial listeners or future entrepreneurs listening to this right now, you can own a business. We can own a business. We can also buy shares in corporations and be owners of businesses. Like it's privately held. Anybody, my mom's from Germany. I have family in East Germany. Like there's night and day difference. Like I don't want that. I never want that. I think there's something inherently beautiful about fair market value for the value you bring to the marketplace. It doesn't mean that we're a more valuable human being. There's prices for things, just like there's not a flat price for everything. I think where we've gone wrong is that we have not controlled capitalism. At the end of the day, the free market, it's literally the Merriam-Webster definition, determines pricing, distribution, production. Like everybody listening right now, we're the free market. We're employees. Like. And I would say that to the counter argument and kind of like, like what's happened in the states of the South of me of like, if you don't like it, don't go to Disney. If you don't like it, and just same thing with, if you don't like a company's values, you don't have to buy Cafe Campesino coffee, but if you do like those values and the impact they're making in the world, by all means, go out of your way to buy Cafe Campesino's coffee, like be the free market and exercise. You can buy whatever you want. And I think that's where we're getting, and I hate that this is getting political but I think we, in a weird way, have kind of let it get to this because we're afraid to call it capitalism or we didn't want to say, to me, it's like, A, I'm in the Southeast, B, those are 2 business degrees sitting behind me on the wall. Like I like the system. I think it was just, I heard my old CEO describe B Corp as guardrails for corporate decision making, and I think that at the end of the day is what it needs to be. I mean, we still have to be profitable. We, no margin, no mission, no profit, no purpose. Like we still have to run. I mean, there are plenty of B Corps that have had to do layoffs. It doesn't mean that we are like kind of like kumbaya. And I think if we are not careful with the messaging that we as a community use, we back ourselves into a corner very quickly, where when we are caught doing layoffs, it's see, B Corps, they're just like the rest of us. In reality, like, yeah, we're capitalist businesses. We occasionally have to make really difficult decisions. But I think planning it as a like, look, we're a new type of business that is trying to, if you boil down what goes into that assessment, it is just good business. It's recruiting and retaining good employees by treating them well, and keeping them on staff because they enjoy working for you. They don't dread Mondays. It's being good stewards of our community, which is going to turn the people in our community into loyal consumers. They're going to want to work for us. They're going to want to buy from us. It's acting like the environment poses a threat to our businesses. This isn't like activism. It's literally recognizing in any big corporation, index fund, like if you think that they're not worried about their operations that are in places that will potentially flood in 50 years in a Southeast Asia or a South Florida, you're lying to yourself.
Right.
They are like, so like that's all we're doing here is we're honestly, it's funny to see the backlash because we're really just using the free market to move the demand curve. That's it. And the free market is speaking right now. So you can legislate it, you can regulate it all you want, but this is capitalism and it's beautiful because it's working.
Yeah, it is working, not perfectly yet. And I would be in the camp who says that capitalism is the best system we've ever invented and also deeply broken. So I'm just curious how do we get to, so it seems to me that the B Corp vision is really based not on, to your point, what you just said, not on increased government regulations, not on putting strictures on businesses, but on changing the value systems of a culture. How do we do that? Because that, to me, look, even in my corporate consulting work, like I go in how do you actually change the value system of a single company? Now, how do you change the value system of a whole culture to the point where they see B Corp and they say, oh, yeah, no, that's the better choice than cheaper, faster, quicker, whatever is the market is trying to sell them. How do we get to that? How do we get to that values conversation, and how do we actually impact the values so that B Corps make even more sense?
That's a great question. I mean, and let's be honest, if we don't have to do the whole history lesson, but we are a very individualistic country. We were founded on kind of that, like, manifest destiny and all these things that did horrible things to people too. Let's be real about that too. But I think like getting to that collective mindset, I think it's going to happen generationally. Yeah. I think when Gen Z showed up, they were very much so, like gas can in hands, like, what, y'all do this? Y'all just like literally live to work. Like, I don't want to do this. And you saw it with like the Great Resignation. Like, no. And there's an element of not, I don't want to be that old guy that's like, oh, this entitled next generation doesn't understand the hard work. And I don't think they're afraid of the hard work. And I think they want to achieve great things. I think they understand that takes hard work. Some of them are just being exactly like we were when we were in our 20s. I could run this company so much better. Oh, with your 2 years of experience in the real world, you could? Yeah, that's brilliant. I was that guy. But I think that they came and wanted it wasn't that they don't want to work hard. It wasn't that they don't want to succeed and be successful and own a business. I think it's that they saw the priorities were kind of in the wrong place of like, this just like squeeze out every last drop of profit, no matter whose neck you have to step on to squeeze it out. I think is where they kind of went like, seriously? And then that caught our attention, the millennials. I'm 40, the oldest millennial's 43 now, of like, oh, hey, Gen Z, what's up? Yeah, no, we've been miserable this whole time. We just didn't have the courage to say anything about it. Like, and I think that's what it's going to take, is like us kind of reinventing and reimagining. I'm not plugging my TED Talk or reimagining capitalism through purpose, but it's the same talking point. It's that is what it's going to take. And I think you're seeing this. And now not only are we like, oh, here's this beautiful example of businesses using, or companies using business of force for good, it's good for business. With where the demand curve shifted, this is a good business strategy for a business. I think that's going to help shift that mindset too, of like, once people, watch any commercial right now. I mean, Kia with an SUV driving down a beach collecting plastic, and the sea turtles show up. Fiji with a green water bottle, like green water. Like, no, it isn't green water. It's a plastic bottle. Like those type, like everybody's doing this now, and they're all chasing that demand curve. So to me, I think that's where it'll start to shift, is that if we keep acting intentionally, I think companies have to change, because the free market's telling them, you know, hey, here's the price point, here's the product they want to buy, and take it or leave it. So, and you know, again, coming back to the, like, if you don't like it, don't buy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Free country, free market, go for it.
So here's another question. I don't mean to be overly difficult. I really want to push down on this, on some of the sort of social factors, though, because I'm in part, I'm just deeply interested. I'm trained as a sociologist. Is there a class divide here? Is class an issue? Like, I saw this a lot. So I did a lot of work in Appalachia, and during my graduate work, and I saw, you know, decisions that were being made in the city were just very different than the decisions that are going to get made in Harlan County, Kentucky. And I'm curious, how much of a class issue is at work in the whole B Corp conversation, and in shifting the values and shifting the market to B Corps?
So this is a great point, and I love talking about this, because, you know, I'm in Athens, Georgia, which Athens, Clark County, Georgia is, I think, the poorest county per capita in the state of Georgia, which you wouldn't know it, because I got this, I mean, I got all my Georgia swag on the wall. You know, like, we got this beautiful university that I have 2 degrees from, these giant, massive buildings, the indoor football complex, and back-to-back championships. You're like, drive away from campus. And I think, you know, in the conversations I have sometimes in B Corp circles are very different than those that I have in Athens circles, or even, I mean, go to Atlanta. There's pockets of Atlanta that are extremely wealthy. There are pockets that are extremely poor, that have been overlooked for generations. And I think there is something to be said for that. I mean, I go back and forth with, sometimes, you know, by nature of what B Corp stand for, it was popular in, I think Portland has 199, California's or 100, 200 something. Anyway, it's in a spreadsheet somewhere on my computer. California, I know, is 399 as of 2 days ago. Colorado is 173. New York has like 148. But up until a couple of years ago, the South had very few. And then people like me have been working pretty hard. And, you know, so you get into these conversations where it's almost that the same thing that kind of happens in and I don't want to take this politically, but it's the same kind of like language, the coastal elites kind of like end up running the show and telling the conversation, and they're using language. Like, at one point it was, we're going to call it a stakeholder driven economic system. I'm like, nobody knows what that is outside of some liberal think tank that came up with that term. I can't walk into a boardroom in the suburbs of Atlanta and be like, so we believe in a stakeholder driven economic system. People were going to like, what is this crazy guy talking about? And you mentioned earlier kind of like the granola factor of like, we can still believe in these ideals and work towards these things without necessarily having to sound like we came up with this, like our policy think tank came up with these, you know, acceptable terms that we're going to use. And like, I think the rest of the country is trying to put food on the table. And they don't necessarily have any idea what you're talking about. So I think there's an element of that that comes into the community of, you know, we jokingly sometimes in like the non like hubs, you know, like when I was out in Idaho last year, having conversations with Idaho B Corps, and you hear these things from these B Corps, like kind of like I can't, sometimes I can't sell what they're putting out. It becomes more and more difficult because I am in a more, you know, even in the South, I talk about that all the time. Like, I've got B Corp owners who are more, who might be right of center politically, but are deeply faith driven to certify as a B Corp and run their business in this way that serves their people, serves their communities, that cares deeply about diversity, equity, inclusion. And it's a faith climb for them, but they might still, you know, be don't touch my money Reagan Republicans at the same time. Like, and but they do plenty of charitable, you know, like it's just it's so different in the rest of the country. And I think sometimes that one size fits all, where we try to tell people what's right for them, sometimes turns people off. And it's an internal debate that's happening right now. But what I will say is I think it is healthy and needed. And I think where our country on all sides has gotten away from is this like encampment in, you're right, I'm wrong. I will not meet you in the middle. I will not understand your argument. To like walk a day in somebody else's shoes of, for somebody selling B Corp in Georgia or in Alabama is being cognizant of like, it's very different down here and the conversations are different. And, it's just, so versus when I go, sometimes I joke about like, when I went out to California a couple times last year, it's a very different conversation. And I almost have to, I don't want to say code switch, but I almost have to go and kind of become somebody else and speak a different language when I'm out there, because they won't know what I'm talking about. If I use if I use the vernacular, I'll try to drop the y'alls in there, but if I speak like I'm in Georgia.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that answer. Thank you. And yeah, this is to me sort of a perplexing problem of culture change broadly, which is that we've wrapped up so much identity in political language and in sort of boundary language. Are you us, are you them kind of thing, that I think is unhelpful. And to me, the beauty of the whole B Corp movement, if we can think of it as a movement, is that, it's people like you that are transcending some of those barriers. So I'm super grateful for that.
Yeah, and we have to make space, and we have to make space for all those people too. We have to
absolutely,
like, I know what a stakeholder-driven economic system. I'm 100% on board. Right. At the end of the day, it's still capital. It's a variation of capitalism, like calling it something else, but it's still the same thing. So like making sure though that we allow for those voices in our community, and the dissenting, the Nespresso voices, pro, con, like Brewdog ended up kind of getting booted as a B Corp, like being able to allow those dissenting voices to be heard and not necessarily like canceled out of the community, I think is going to be important to the long-term success of the B Corp movement.
I love that. I love that vision. All right. I want to put your sort of consultant hat, your B Corp consulting hat now. So let's start with an existing corporation. So existing company, let's say 200, 250 employees listening to this podcast, they're like, oh, B Corp, I love what Nathan's laying down. I want to get involved. First steps, like what does the journey look like? Where do they start? How do they begin the process? What does that look like?
Oh, well, welcome, and get ready for like more improvement than you have no idea how powerful this process is going to be. Honestly, step one, and I even have all my clients do this, is just take the assessment, because you're going to go through that assessment, and I don't care how good of a company you are. And I'm not even going to say think you are. You probably are. If you're thinking about doing this, you are a good company, but let's get you to great. So start with taking the assessment. And that assessment, I spoke somewhere the other day, and the person who spoke after me talked about her experience going through this, and it was, but go through that assessment and start to see what you can answer as much of it as you can. But you're going to be blown away by how many things you're like, oh, how many companies tell me like, we volunteer a lot. And you're like, how many hours, what percentage of your employees participated? Like some of these were, we haven't quantified that. So we're going to go through the assessment and just answer as much as we can. And then I'm going to get involved, and I'm going to go through and figure out like, okay, here are all these things. I usually do some discovery sessions with like, I want to meet with everybody. I want to meet with the CEO, the COO. I want to meet with the depending on what it is, like one of my bigger clients was an accounting firm. I want to meet with your, bookkeepers. I want to meet with the accountants. I want to meet with the fractional CFOs. I want to meet with everybody in this organization, understand like, what is the culture to them? What do they value about working here? And then come back to that assessment and start using that context as we build out not only where we're going to find our 80 points and what improvements we're going to make, but what aligns, like what out of this assessment aligns with what it is our employees love about being here, what it is our customers enjoy about doing business with us. Like, how are we going to use this certification as well to tell a really compelling story about what an awesome business we are? And then going through and also figuring out like, where can we shore things up? Like, oh, well, we only have this many volunteer hours. Well, have you done a company-wide volunteer event? Just putting some strategy around like, what is our community impact? What organizations are you currently supporting? How does that come back to the brand in a way that we can kind of use it as a storytelling tool as well? Yeah. And then let's figure out like what coordinated, even the little things. Like I had a company the other day and just happened to, I'm the board chair for Keep Athens Beautiful. They're in Athens, happens to be the road right in front of their office isn't adopted. Boom. There's 4 quarterly cleanups a year. My old company, we did the same thing in North Georgia. It was like, and we call it the Advic Highway. And this one now will be the Olis Highway. But what a cool opportunity. So the strategies like that of like, what fun ways can we engage the team? And so I come at it from a culture and impact perspective too. So yeah, it's that taking the initial pass, and then I would recommend, especially a company that size, hiring somebody, even if you have somebody championing the project on the inside, get somebody like me, Carolina Miranda. There's some really cool ones out there that understand the process,
Right.
and understand not only how to help you like check the boxes sounds too easy. It's not just checking the boxes. It's implementing it. It's beyond just like, okay, cool, we have a new policy.
Right.
How do we roll this policy out? How do we use this policy internally to let our employees, like, how do we publicize it? How do we make this a retention tool? How do we make our employees rave about working here with some of these different things? How do we get their feedback before we go, hey, everybody will love 40 hours a week, a year to volunteer?
Right.
Will they? What do they want to do? How do we engage them? What options do we give them? Like, so really going deep and like doing it right. It's kind of like software. If you can get Salesforce, it's great, but out of the box, it's worthless unless it's implemented very well. Yeah, you could probably do it yourself. Nobody's going to use it. And after a year, you go, why am I paying for all these licenses? So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of
That's a great answer.
My strategy of like, and then like get in, take it, and then just get somebody who really knows the ins and outs, not just of the assessment, but the tactical of the implementation piece to get your, and again, don't be afraid of saying it, to get your ROI as well. It's an investment of time and money and resources, and but this should be looked at as an investment, not an expense.
I love that. And I love, some of the corporate clients that I work with, we're always trying to figure out how to assess culture. What I love about the B Corp process is it has these really specific tools. I'm wondering if you could tell us some either war stories or success stories. I'd love to hear both. Like, can you give us an example of a company that just, really struggled and overcame, and then maybe not by name, but some companies that have really struggled to get there? I'd love to sort of put some flesh around this idea of taking an existing company and moving it toward B Corp status.
Yeah, I think the fun ones are the bigger ones. Just because again, it's more of turning an ocean liner. And so we had one. And so the big curveball lately has been that there's so much demand for B Corp certification, and rightly so, that there's like the wait. 2020 happened, and you see George Floyd get murdered, you have COVID, you have everybody assumed that maybe like demand's going to drop for this B Corp thing. Like nobody this is going to back burner. And then no, it went the opposite direction. They just got bombarded with applications of business owners out there going like, what was that old movie? Like, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Of like news, maybe something like that. Yeah.
So you have all these, entrepreneurs, business owners out there going like, no, none of this is acceptable. And so you have this like doubling down on B Corp values. So working with a couple companies, and it took forever to get to the queue because they just got crushed with demand. And good problems to have. People get really frustrated, and I try to remind them like, hey, we're like growing a movement, and like anybody who's scaled a business gets the choppiness, and poor B Lab is stuck in the middle and everybody's just complaining and bombarding them. You got me complaining about their marketing campaigns. You got other people complaining about the queue, and it's, and you look at it and you're like, but by the time you get to the verification part, you're like, I don't even remember like what, it's like the consultant, you're like, all right, I have to totally regroup with this client. Like, what did we answer? Why did we answer that way? Like I had one company that, some of the advice of the implementation part was, y'all are at a point, I've been at a company of similar sizes, you need an HR director. You need to bring this in-house, and you need to have them, they're going to need to own these policies that we're implementing. They're going to need to own these metrics. It's not going to happen ad hoc. And so at this point now they've hired an HR director who's been here for a year, so we have these like, oh my gosh, and we're trying to figure out, and like so many, and we had added new policies, and we'd added new benefits. So like half of our answers were out of date, where I'm like, oh wait, so normally you go through it and you're like, okay. And then they send you get through this, the evaluation queue, and then you go to the verification phase, and they give you a bunch of answers, and you're like, all right, boom, boom, boom. This works. Well, now at this point, this company's grown. and we're having to go in and we're like, okay, so we're going to lose these points because that answer doesn't exist anymore, or this doesn't. But also I went back through the entire assessment and was like, okay, but I found we're going to lose 11 points, but I found 13 that we should get because of the changes we've implemented.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
was almost like starting from scratch. And at the end of the day, with an 80.1, they certified, and that's all you need. And I tell people, leave the ego at the door. So
Right.
that was probably my favorite one, just because there was so much in flux. And even my old job, I remember when we first certified, there was like 22 employees, something like that. We were small, and then by the time we recertified, it was like 110 or something. So like, it was like a different company. It was like going through it
Right.
all over again. And lucky for us, like I was doing that. So I had all the KPIs, and I had kept making sure that we were hitting volunteer goals and diversity goals and all these different things, but it was still like recertifying a totally different. But that's the beauty of, I love the recertification aspect. Every 3 years you're recertifying. So, and the standards are improving. So like, it's not enough to like rest on your laurels. Like, you're going to have to keep up with the B Labs is, instead of keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to keep up with this evolving, moving kind of goal line, or moving goalposts that are evolving as that demand curve kind of sets into place and we're shifted here. It's like, which is again coming back to my earlier argument, kind of why I'm like, hey, like let's where we're at now, let's push it a couple yards down. Let's appreciate the progress of the journey and not just kind of demand that everybody's 15 years ahead. But I think
Yeah.
that's the fun part though, is tracking that progress. And and then when you get in the community of B Corps, you get to learn from all these other companies. So I think it makes that progress a little bit easier, because it's like, what you have your ear to the ground of, like, what are all these
Right.
crazy companies
Yeah.
doing? And you're finding inspiration from, when you think, man, I'm really out there just saving the world, and you get out there and you meet some other people and you're like, well, I'm doing nothing with my life. I should
Sure.
be
Yeah.
doing so much more. And so, but you're surrounded by people like that, so it makes that continuous improvement part of the journey easier.
I love that. And what I love about it, I'm just thinking, I had my consulting hat on there for a minute, and I imagine this has the added benefit of helping companies stay evergreen in those 5 areas.
Yes. I think, I mean, and now it's funny because B Lab has invested a lot in networks.
Yeah.
And for me, I got lucky that Christina, who I mentioned earlier that I wasn't mentioning as my inspirational leader, Christina, when she was at that first meeting with Jeff, she did her MBA at UGA. She'd worked on a
Yeah.
B Corp project. She was working at a B Corp. We certified. I said, what do we do? Like,
Yeah.
again, going back to the implementation piece, we used student consultants who didn't know what they were doing. So it was like, what do we do? We got certified. And like my CEO and I are like, yeah, we did it. And like everybody else, like, we did what? Like,
Right.
nobody in the company knows what we did. Like, we like, I don't know what we're supposed to do. We do a press release? Like, what I have no idea. Like, and what's next after that? Like, do we just certify? Like, where does the ROI come from? And Christina goes, Nathan, just get involved in the community and you'll figure it out from there. And I went, okay. And so I started going, I went to, by accident, I went to the B Summit in Amsterdam, which I'm going to again this summer, which is exciting. This time, not by accident. I thought it was a global summit in 2018. My boss sent me to Amsterdam.
Right.
Waited a couple of years, so I told him, yeah, that was all just European companies. So,
but you got a trip to Amsterdam out of it.
I did.
So,
it was great. Middle
yeah.
of the World Cup too. Went over to Germany. Anyway, and then I went back. I came back. And I went to New Orleans for the actual North American conference, and I'm like blown away. And from that, like talk about getting involved. I started the B Culture Call, that brings all these culture leaders from around the country together to just kind of talk about, like, I don't know, a lot of us are like all of a sudden pseudo HRE kind of ish people.
Sure.
Like, I've never done SHRM. I didn't like OB. But we're wearing those hats, engagement, and how do we retain talent? Like a lot of that overlap in the Venn diagram. So I started that call. And then there was a B2B B Corps call that I was like, man, like, I mean, I kind of in the face of my old company in the B Corp community. So I started going to the B2B B Corps call. And so I started building, and then I built B Local Georgia. And then you fast forward now, and B Lab has, not everybody's going to have that gumption. Not every small business owner or small team has that time to get as involved as I did. I don't know that I had the time. I think I'm just a crazy person, but B Lab has now invested and made it a lot easier for new B Corps to get plugged in and, like, get your new HR director into the, the culture call and the talent collective, some of these calls that are happening, get your, CRO into the B2B B Corp space, if it's a women-led company, there's a We the Change, which is women entrepreneurship. There's an EOS group. There's There's a B tourism group, there's a B fashion group, there's like everything, so people can start to get together, and not only, I mean, it's just beautiful collaborations come out of it, knowledge sharing, and just, and again, it's finding inspiration in your, this group, this collective group of people made up of again, different backgrounds, different opinions, different upbringings, different business types, just this beautiful like mosaic of people who are all unified by this desire to use business as a force for good.
I love that. I love that. And I'm going to ask you to take us out on a big pick with a really big picture question. This is a question I've been playing around with lately with guests, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because your subject matter is so related to the future of our world, the future of our planet, the future of humanity. So I want you to imagine that the 5 most important world leaders listen to this podcast, and they're like, dude, we got to get on board with this B Corp movement. And I want you to look 15 to 20 years out into the future and ask what you think the world could look like 15 to 20 years from now, half a generation from now, if this whole B Corp movement really took hold.
So my vision, and I'm big on like upstream solutions, embracing the journey. I say all the time that, you know, be the change you want to see in the world, even if you're not alive to see it. Even if it happens after you, but be that ripple in time. You know, 10, 15 years from now, like, I see things much more equitable. I see things where, you know, some of society's biggest problems of you know, crime, of homelessness, of poverty, of generation after generation, intergenerational poverty, of lack of opportunity, like it all comes back to similar things, and it's that lack of economic opportunity. And I think that the ethos of the B Corp community, when we talk about, you know, I mean, even the planet, I mean, I didn't even touch on that, the climate planet, you see a community of businesses and business owners and employees and people that want to work at B Corps. You see this community working together to solve some of society's biggest problems. You have a Grayson Bakery who, you know, saw recidivism and homelessness in the 80s and went, what if we just went to open hiring? You see these ideas coming out of B Corps. And so in 15 to 20 years, I think if this movement really takes off, you see true diversity, equity, inclusion work. It's not just like, oh, can I get, you know, the ecosystem I came from was, I think it was 3% African American. Right. What? Like, you know, so it's like, great. Yeah. I mean, we can go out and try to recruit that little sliver of diverse talent, or, you know, and then good on us if they stay. We're inclusive. We've got a great culture. Good. I mean, good job, you know. But at the end of the day, did we accomplish anything if in 15 years that ecosystem is still 3%? No, we didn't really accomplish anything for society's greater good. And I think what you see coming out of the B Corp community is a more intentional focus on outcomes. You know, materiality assessments, like what externalities are we measuring? Like what determines whether we were successful? Even our volunteer efforts, like what impact are we making in our communities long term? And I think thinking about things from a long-term perspective is that paradigm shift of, you know, we used to say making capitalism work for everyone and for the long term. That was literally a shirt they gave away at a Champions Retreat a couple of years ago. And I think that's what it comes down to is that long-term thinking of, yes, we need to make payroll and we need to make, you know, a business owner, I'm taking a risk. I would like a return on my risk and my capital investment and all those things. And those are fine. But I think also knowing that, like, you know, I don't need a rocket ship to take me to the moon because of the risk I took. I don't need infinite wealth. I would like to see that we have like incremental impact and progress made on these pressing issues of 10, 15 years from now. We've invested money in, you know, schools and vocational programs and internships and apprenticeships and training programs and we've focused on like what upstream can we do to solve these issues. And we as a business community, I think entrepreneurs are uniquely positioned to solve society's biggest issues. Think about it. We used to buy bread that wasn't sliced. Some entrepreneur, I bet I'd sell more if I sliced it. You know, I think we are positioned as business people, as entrepreneurs, as leaders to solve some of these problems. And I can't think of a better community do that work in the B Corp space. And I think that 15, 20 years from now, we will be in a better place because the B Corp movement started and thrived and continued to grow.
I love that vision.
I'm
I
running
love
for
that
president
vision.
of B Corpville 2024.
And
Somebody
I'll
they call me
be-
the mayor of B Corpville. I'm like, whatever, I'll take it.
I'll be your campaign manager, man. Well, Nathan Stuck, this was amazing. Real quick, tell people how to find you, how to get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and thank you. This was a blast. And probably, honestly, you probably got me more candid than I've probably ever been on some of
I love it.
the differing of opinions in our community, which I again embrace and find healthy. You can find me. I quit everything except for the LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn /linkedin.com/Nathan A. Stuck. The company is LinkedIn. I'm guessing just look Profitable Purpose Consulting up. I'm guessing it's linkedin.com/Profitable Purpose Consulting. I make you earn it because you have to spell it. And then Be Local Georgia is also on there at linkedin.com/Be Local Georgia. And then we're on the gram for Be Local Georgia, but I outsource that work to my MBA student board fellows. So well, you get on, I log in, and next thing you know, I have 30 minutes later, I'm just watching like cat videos.
Yeah.
I'm like, what am I doing? What did I come on here to do? I forgot. So yeah, I had to delegate that one out.
And for everybody listening, all of that information is going to be in the show notes. So you can click on the links in the show notes. But Nathan, this was great. I love your vision. I'm grateful for your work, and thanks for your presence here, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely will. And thank you for, I guess, amplifying the voice, my voice, the voice of B Corps in my region and in my state. And yeah, pleasure. So thank you.